Biden lies, Trump says some goodbyes, and the Republican Party cries. I'm Josiah Evertson, and this is The Glorious Rescue.
Aren't you tired of feeling forced to choose between staying informed and being indoctrinated? Listen to the condensed news cycle without the lies, agendas, and confusion from the mainstream media, all while engaging in deeper discussions about the principles that have influenced our great nation. This is what rescuing America looks like. This is The Glorious Rescue.
Welcome back to another episode of The Glorious Rescue. Today we're going to try to be doing a little bit more of an expedited episode. And I do know that first and foremost, you guys are going to be right off the bat saying, Josiah, you say this quite often. And then you know what? It ends up being just as long. If not, you know what? Even a little bit longer than when you say it's going to be an expedited episode. And I am aware of that, but we actually are attempting that today. Just going to be running through some headlines and then a little bit different of an end of show segment, but one that I do think is needed. And also will be helpful to all of us, including myself. I wanted to start off by just saying thank you to all of you. Thank you for the overwhelming support of the last several episodes, especially the Asking Strangers episodes. I do think that those have become a listener favorite, so make sure to stay tuned. Make sure to go down and click that subscribe button so that you're in the know for all of the latest Asking Strangers episodes, as well as episodes like these, where we cover the day-to-day news, as well as jump into a deeper discussion about American history, philosophy, etc. So first off, Biden lies. What am I referring to? I'm specifically referring to an article written by Jacob Fallock entitled 5 Broken Promises and Flip-Flops from Joe Biden's First Month in Office. And yes, you absolutely heard me right. Just in the first month of office, many, and we don't have time to go through actually all 5 of them, break them down, but just environmental policies, definitely immigration policies and whatnot, completely flipping on his original position. I would also add Syria to that and beginning the raids in Syria, starting another war, just as if, America hasn't been involved in enough wars already. Nevertheless, Biden lying, Biden flip-flopping on all kinds of issues that I don't need to sit here and explain and go through for you to realize. But very easily put, we know that he is doing so. I mean, just look at the videos of him going back and forth on fracking and now just going back and forth on all different types of policies. Next is in regards to the election, and not really going to get too far into this. What I will say, though, is that in regards to the election, the Supreme Court did actually decide that they were not going to hear the very last remaining case for voter fraud and whatnot. So just recently over the past day, or just today or so, or past couple days by the time this episode airs, the Supreme Court did decide that they are not going to hear that last one. That's really the update on the election. I will say, though, that there are many state legislators, at least a couple, for instance, first off, I think it was started off by Georgia, that have come out and in those respective state legislators begin to pass election reform and election process reform, and that is the way to do so. If you have been listening on the show for the past any little bit of time, you know that I've stated over and over and over again that it is not the court's job to start legislating what the election process is, but that these need to be done by the state legislators on a state level, reforming this. And so good job, Georgia, good job to the states that are beginning to reform all of this. And lastly, well, not necessarily lastly, I got another one after this, but we're just going to briefly mention COVID, the update on COVID, before one more story, before adding into our end of show segment. So very, very quickly, there have been several states. I can't remember if I've recently talked about this, but there have been several states that, and I don't think I actually have. I think in hindsight, what it is I have been planning on doing this and mentioning this over the past several episodes, and it just hasn't happened. We haven't gotten into current events for a while, so I do apologize there. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you're in the know when we continue to do so. Also, I need your help. If you can comment down below right now what you think the schedule should look like. What are you looking for in the show? If you're thinking more episodes, maybe you're thinking of weekly episodes. So I'm actually referring to dialing back the number of episodes, maybe to have a longer episode, maybe a 30-minute weekly episode. Maybe you're thinking of longer, more broken up episodes. I thought of the idea of having more episodes, but just like 5 to 10 minutes talking about certain key topics, like actually heatedly debated topics, just very briefly, more of the Asking Strangers episodes. So comment down below what you think I should do more of. Every episode, every personality, and I don't consider myself any type of personality per se. Many would say that I lack it altogether. But anyways, comment down below what you think my niche is. Every show kind of has its niche is what I was referring to. So what do you think the niche of the show is? What do you like to see going forward? Or is it the status quo, what we're doing here? And if it is the status quo, make sure to comment down below still that it is the status quo so that I can know. But briefly, on COVID, many states, just done so by the governor, have opened back up. 100% capacity, no more state mandates, mask mandates, I should say. All of the above. Just deciding, you know what, we're done with it. My opinion, go for it. You're the governor of the state, right? It was signed. It wasn't necessarily any type of legislation. It was signed into law per se, quote unquote law, by the executive branch. So the executive branch can take it away. Do they have the right? Absolutely. If legislators can get mad at this, but if they are not signing in legislation requiring it, then it's kind of on them in the first place. Also, in other news, Johnson & Johnson has come out with another COVID vaccination. So that does make 3, I believe, so now approved by the FDA. That is Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson. There is a 4th AstraZeneca, which is approved in like Australia, but not yet here by the FDA. Anyways, so we have more vaccines coming out. I did see somewhere that there were zoo animals getting COVID vaccinations before many people have been given the chance to. Nevertheless, not going to get into all of that. But when I was referring to states starting to open back up, I know of specifically Texas, Mississippi, and some other ones as well. Just to kind of wrap it up, I want to briefly talk about the COVID plan, the new stimulus package, relief package, whatever we want to call it. It is a $1.9 trillion package. Basically, what it does is it extends unemployment to $300 a week till September, roughly. And then 2 other items, which is stimulus checks, $1,400 checks, as well as tax credits when we file for the year of 2021 for taxes. So there is a 3-prong. I should say that it is a lot bigger than just a 3-prong COVID relief package, because you could add a 4th prong, which is Obamacare, because Obamacare and Obamacare expansion is in the new COVID package, as well as a lot of other crazy random stuff that has nothing to do with the coronavirus. In last minute news, Kylie McEnany, and I do believe I've been pronouncing her name wrong. I don't know why. I don't know if I called her McEnany or whatnot, but I do believe it's McEnany. Yeah, Kylie McEnany is what we're going to go with. Anyway, she did come out and basically come after Psaki, who is the White House press secretary for Biden, making fun of all of her circle back statements. All you got to do is look up press secretary circle back compilations on YouTube, and you will find a substantial bit of humorous information for you to look at. But Kylie did come out and say basically that she always knew where Trump stood on everything. That's her job. Her job is to know what Trump would say. And so there was never really a time where she had to just quote unquote circle back. And if she did, it was not as often as the current White House press secretary. In other news, I almost just called her McEnany again. McEnany has also taken a position as a Fox News contributor. So congrats to her. Yay for that. And we're now going to head over into an intro segment of the Founding Era. Welcome back to another segment of the Founding Era. Today, I have something very exciting planned. And I do know that in these Founding Eras, we've talked about going through the Federalist Papers. We've talked about going through more of the amendments because we still have more amendments. We've talked about going through the Constitution, which we have started to. We have all of these starting points that we've gone through that we have not continued on. And that is not because I have forgotten. That's not because I don't want to. I still have all of those literally on the docket to continue to go through, but just a lack of time, I guess, throughout all these episodes. Today, I want to go through just a few principles believed by, some beliefs from the founders. And this, I will say that I'm not going to take credit from this. This was a series of items, of beliefs, I should say, from the founders that was given to me by a college professor that I do like, and I did a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of revision. I'm only going to go through a couple of them here on the show today. But first, start off with one of them, and that is a belief in God. A belief in God's providence, a belief that he guides and controls the universe and the affairs of mankind. This is very, very key because many times you will hear that the founders were deists, that all they believed is that God created the world but has left it's completely alone, that he is no longer involved in the world and in the universe. This is desperately wrong. In fact, 98% of the founders said in their own writings, or a contemporary said about them in their writings about them, that 98% of those founding fathers had a deep belief in an involved God. They believed in an involved God. That's a really hard statement to make. An immanent God, that he interacts and infuses himself with his creation, 98%. There were some deists. Jefferson was a little bit deistic. Benjamin Franklin was definitely not, and that is one that is touted as being a deist. But he also said that we know that God sees a sparrow that falls, and if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground without a God realizing it, how can an empire rise without God's knowledge? And so he called upon the men at the Constitutional Convention to prayer and to start off the days in prayer, and a deist who would not believe in such things. So anyways, a belief in God, belief in providence. In fact, we've had several end of show segments that you can go back and find where we talked about the founders' beliefs in God and really the biblical founding of our nation. That is one that we have talked about on the show many, many times that you can go back and refer to as well. I could go on and on, but I'm not going to go through some of these. One of them is a belief in the God-given power of human reason to apprehend truth. Very true. A belief that God gave mankind reason, and not to puff ourselves up, not to create truth, but to simply apprehend truth, to find out, I guess, to discover the truth, not in an Enlightenment era type of way, but to realize that it is the fact that God gave us human reason that should stir us to use that reason to know who God is, what he desires from us, and how government plays a role in that, how that really applies to our governmental systems. Here's a very key one: a belief that man is not a perfect being, nor a perfectible being, and that governmental theories must take that fact into account. A belief in the sinful nature of man. This is key, because if you believe that man is naturally good, inherently good, or evolves into perfection, what is good, then you don't really necessarily see a need for government, because man doesn't need government. Why govern man if he's naturally good? But because you believe that man is not perfect, he can't be perfect, then you need government to step in to be able to rein in on man's sinful nature. And that is another one of the points basically mentioned here, that God has ordained human government simply to restrain the sinful nature of man. Another one, a belief that governments are formed by covenant or compact of the people in order to safeguard human rights. I actually highly recommend you go back to the 4th episode. In the 4th episode, we go through the Mayflower Compact, and that greatly illustrates this statement right here, that governments are formed by the people in order to safeguard their rights. And that is what the Mayflower Compact was. When the Pilgrims landed on Plymouth Rock, they realized that they were landing in a different area. I wonder if we're still under the King's Charter. And so they realized that they needed to set up a social construct, a social compact, a government is what it was, a civil body politic to rein in on man's sinful nature and to protect the rights of mankind. I could go on and on and on. There are many, many good ones here, but unfortunately we don't have time to go through all of them. The founders also believed that the revealed law and the law of nature, which would be the law of nature and of nature's God, include natural God-given unalienable rights, which include life, liberty, and property. We've talked about this many times on the show before, but go back to the Declaration of Independence. They believed in God, and they had to believe in God because we know that they talk about the law of nature and the law of nature's God. Certain moral laws, certain scientific laws that are written into the conscience of man that are revealed to us also by the Holy Scriptures, and that from that we can derive the basis of our governmental system, and that system is there to then defend life, liberty, and property of its citizens. Another one that I think is very important is that the governments only have such powers that are delegated to them by the people in those compacts. A government of the people, the consent of the governed. Another one is that rulers tend to usurp more and more power if given the opportunity. And because of that, you must separate the powers. And this is where we will conclude really this end of show segment. There are many, many more beliefs of the founders, but this one specifically is the idea that we've already talked about, that man has a sinful nature. And so because man has a sinful nature, we have to set up a government, not above it to rule over them, but as a servant, really a servant to serve the people in order to protect its rights, to safeguard those unalienable God-given rights. That government was solely set up to protect the rights and not to give the rights because they were given by God. But because we know man has a sinful nature, we have to institute that government. But because man has a sinful nature, we need limitations on government. James Madison is noted for saying that basically if mankind were angels, if we were divine, if we didn't sin, then we wouldn't need government. And not only that, but if angels or the divine ruled over man in a government, then we didn't necessarily need limitations on government because government can corrupt. But because man has a sinful nature, because man naturally is bad, is evil, we now need a government instituted to rein in man's sinful natures, but we need external and internal limitations on that same government so that it cannot corrupt the rulers. Those external limitations would be those limitations outside of the government, which would be consent of the governed, that we get to naturally re-elect our leaders. That's a limitation on government. A limitation on tyrants coming to power. Internal limitations would be things like separation of powers, federalism, which is the federalism being the break from state governments and federal governments, that we have a break in those governments. We have executive, legislative, and judicial branches of government where the power is separated so that one body, one central power cannot overcome and take over the rights of the people. It is simply to safeguard our rights and our liberties that are given to us by God. Anyways, that also plays into fact why self-government is so important, because the more mankind reins in on his own sinful nature, the more he exercises his free will and his choice to rein in his sinful nature, the less is needed for a government to come in and do that for them. Meaning that the founders believed very heavily in self-government, because if man practices self-government, if man is pious and religious and does right, not for salvation, but simply just because that is a right way to live, then there is less government and less need for that government. Very important, self-government being a key to our nation's founding and to our governmental system. That's how I want to go ahead and end off this episode. I want to make sure to give you that same encouragement to continue to share these episodes. It is greatly appreciated. It helps us very, very much. In fact, the reason why those Asking Strangers episodes have become so well loved, I guess, so much of listener favorites is because of the fact of how much you guys are sharing these episodes. So I greatly appreciate that. Make sure to continue to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to like and comment down below what you think the niche is of the show or what you want to see going forward. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Josiah Iverson, and this is The Glorious Rescue.